The Zen Environment by Marian Mountain. The Mudra of Zazen. Just above a rocky beach, there is a grassy knoll next to a small creek where I sometimes sit in the late afternoon. Here I can allow my mind to flow through the small willows, reeds, and grasses, over and under the big and little rocks, until it mingles with the incoming tide. At the edge of the shore, a huge black boulder sits half in and half out of the water. One white gull sits on top of the rock. Today, while searching my mind for the essential nature of Zazen, I realize that the black rock has been sitting much longer than I. So in my mind, I ask the rock this question: what is the essence of Zazen? The white gull spreads its wings and rises on a current of wind, circles above and behind me, and then gracefully returns to its sitting place on top of the rock. Is that it? I ask myself. But it isn't exactly. The gull rises once again and circles on the current of wind and settles down on a neighboring rock next to 5 cormorants. I don't quite understand, but maybe someday I will. The physical posture of Zazen is an almost insurmountable wall for Westerners, especially for those over the age of 30. I was over 40 when I first began to practice Zazen. During the first few months of trying to twist my legs into the cross-legged position, my knees refused to touch the floor. My posture looked more like that of a frog sitting on a lily pad than a Buddha. 3 years passed before I was able to maintain a half-lotus position in reasonable comfort. During those first years of Zen practice, it was difficult for me to understand the statement of Dogen Zenzi, founder of the Japanese Soto Zen school, who maintained that Zazen was a comfortable way. I often asked myself why I continued to put up with the physical pain of the lotus posture. Suzuki Roshi was very sympathetic with physical difficulties encountered by American students and never tried to force any of them to push themselves beyond their self-imposed limitations. My master encouraged older students to sit in straight chairs if they felt that the cross-legged posture of Zazen was too difficult or too painful for them. But few of Suzuki Roshi's American students, even those over 60, failed to make a determined and constantly renewed effort to sit in the traditional cross-legged position. Most of Suzuki Roshi's students discovered, as I did, little by little, that they were able to accomplish much more than they had ever dreamed possible. Of course, the example set by the Zen master is an important factor in motivating Zen students to sit through the physical discomfort. Just as a child is encouraged to try to stand up and walk by the example set by his parents, so a Zen student is moved to try to practice Zazen by the example set by the Zen master. To the Zen student, the master is the living proof of the Zen teaching. Shinran, the founder of the Japanese Shinshu sect of Buddhism, expressed this kind of spiritual motivation when he said, "I do not care whether I go to hell or elsewhere, but because my old master taught me to invoke the name of Buddha, I practice the teaching." But it is not only the influence of the Zen master which keeps the students from abandoning the traditional Buddhist posture. The mudra of Zazen generates its own power. A mudra is a Sanskrit term which refers to a body position or a physical gesture believed to have magical powers. The physical gesture of gassho is a mudra. Actually, the magic power of a mudra is not something supernatural. It's an everyday kind of power. A simile is a physical gesture. No, I'm sorry. A smile is a physical gesture which has magical power. A smile is not only an outer expression of an inner state of mind, but it can of itself affect the inner attitude, not only of the person who smiles, but also the person who observes the smile. The language of the body has been shown by psychologists to have definite effects upon human beings. Some of the messages communicated by body language are as universally understandable as a smile or a handshake. Others are more specialized, sophisticated, or less consciously explainable. The mudra of Zazen manifests something beyond our conscious understanding. The mudra of the Buddha sitting in full lotus posture expresses the deepest truth of Buddhism. To paraphrase Marshall McLuhan, the mudra is the message. Zazen is enlightenment. The figure of the crucified Christ is also a kind of mudra which expresses one of Christianity's highest truths. When a religious devotee meditates upon the figure of the crucified Christ or the figure of the seated Buddha, the symbolic meaning of the images can be translated into many levels of his own life. But while the personal knowledge of Christ crucified remains forever beyond the direct experience of the ordinary person, the realization of the seated Buddha can be directly experienced by almost any human being who makes a sincere effort to assume the physical mental posture of Zazen. Zazen is not a particular religious practice limited exclusively to Buddhism. The practice of Zazen is the expression of truth before it becomes religion. Suzuki Roshi once told me that it was easy for a Buddhist to be a Christian, but it was very difficult for a Christian to be a Buddhist. I did not understand what he meant at the time. It was only after many years of practicing Zazen and studying Buddhism that I began to make peace with my Christian roots and could feel comfortable with the message of the crucifixion. In Zen Buddhism, the cross of the symbol, the transcendence of good and evil, is expressed externally and experienced internally by the cross-legged position of Zazen. So the most important thing is not the intellectual study of Zen Buddhism, but the direct teaching of the body language of Zazen. And this is why physical posture is emphasized by Zen masters. In Buddhism, it is said that the sage touches nirvana with the body. In other words, Buddhism is not understood just in the head, but with the bones, with the muscles, with the joints, with the blood and the lungs, with the air that circulates through the lungs. Suzuki Roshi put great emphasis on physical posture. He reminded his students to watch their posture when they were studying, eating, or driving a car. He often told his students that the most important thing in taking the Zazen posture was to keep their spines straight. I once read about an interesting psychological study conducted at the University of Kansas in which it was demonstrated that subjects who sat in an erect posture were more encouraged to talk about themselves than when they sat in comfortably reclining postures. It was speculated that people might feel more vulnerable and ill at ease in the lying down or sitting bent postures. Of course, in psychiatry or psychology, as well as in Zen, the goal is not just to talk about ourselves, but to become more aware of ourselves, to see ourselves as we really are. It is only after we become aware of ourselves that we find it easy to talk about ourselves. It is quite probable that the sitting erect posture of Zazen evolved in ancient times and has continued to this day because it is the posture which is most effective in encouraging self-awareness. The researchers at the University of Kansas study had no satisfactory explanation for the widespread use of the reclining posture in psychoanalysis, but they wondered if the use of the psychiatric couch might be the result of some kind of patient-specialist relationship. In my opinion, it is my opinion that the use of the psychiatric couch may unconsciously encourage the patient to become overly dependent upon the psychiatrist. In the posture of Zazen, one sits erect without leaning upon anything or anyone. From the first day of Zen practice, Zen students, unlike psychiatric patients, are encouraged by the posture of Zazen to become self-supporting. Sometimes the cross-legged posture of Zazen is recommended because it is most stable and balanced, and it can maintain over long periods of meditation. If this were the only reason to cross the legs while meditating, anyone who did not intend to spend some time in a Zen monastery or a Zen temple might be tempted to forego the discomfort of the lotus position. But it is not just for the physical stability that the cross-legged posture is assumed. It is for its self-illuminating power as well. The broad base of the cross-legged posture internalizes the foundation of Zen Buddhism. When a person sits in full lotus position, his left foot is on his right thigh, and his right foot is on his left thigh. Suzuki Roshi pointed out that when we cross our legs like this, even though we have a right leg and a left leg, they have become one. The position expresses the oneness of duality, not two and not one. Suzuki Roshi said that the teaching of not two and not one is the most important teaching in Buddhism. It is also one of the most difficult of the Buddhist teachings to realize, not just in the head, but in the deepest marrow of our bones. The cross-legged mudra of Zazen reaches the whole heart, body, mind in a way that makes the truth of Buddhism not just second-hand information, but first-hand experience. Those who experience great pain while sitting in the cross-legged position have, to some extent, an advantage over those who from the first find the posture quite comfortable. It may take longer for those who find the posture easy to realize the guts of Zen. In Zazen, we learn to evaluate our attitude towards pain. Norman Cousins once pointed out that Americans are probably the most ignorant people on the face of the earth when it comes to the subject of physical pain. Most of us have been conditioned to believe that all pain is evil. But this is not the case. Many forms of pain are natural and normal. The important thing in understanding physical pain is to know that it increases in intensity with fear or resistance. As long as we can accept the painful legs or the sore back of Zazen as healthy and normal kinds of pain, we will not add the extra complication of fear or resistance to our original feeling. As our ability to concentrate improves, and our dualistic habit of labeling experience as pleasant or unpleasant falls away, the physical pain of Zazen will become less of a problem to us. We must remember, however, that the purpose of Zazen is not to train spiritual athletes, but to express our original nature. We should not try to force ourselves or punish ourselves with the physical posture of Zazen. Sometimes I think that Zazen is like toilet training. Suzuki Roshi had a very optimistic and relaxed attitude toward the habit of Zazen. Like a good parent, he did not try to force his students before they were ready, or to make them feel ashamed if they were not able to sit in the cross-legged position for long periods without moving. The harmful effects of forced toilet training are well documented in the psychological literature. I'm afraid that the harmful effects of overzealous Zen training have had less attention. A child who picks up good toilet habits early in life moves his bowels naturally. A Zen student who picks up good Zen habits early in his practice moves his mind naturally. Suzuki Roshi occasionally made suggestions, but it was up to the student to decide for himself if he wanted to accept the suggestions or not. And Suzuki Roshi usually watched his students for some time before he began to suggest any changes. The first correction Suzuki Roshi made on my posture happened 6 months after I'd been practicing Zazen under his supervision. At that time, Roshi pushed in my back at the waist to form a more natural curve. This small correction made a deep impression upon me. Roshi told me that the long experience had taught him that it was a waste of time to go around continually correcting the posture. Of Zen students, a change in posture to be effective has to be timed to correspond with the inner ripeness. Otherwise, the correction would only result in a temporary change. Roshi let me work out the problem of my legs by myself. He never criticized me for moving in the middle of a period of Zazen. A half period of Zazen done in half lotus position hits the mark when it's done wholeheartedly. A full period of Zazen done in full lotus position misses the mark if it's done half-heartedly. My own experience, though limited, has taught me that it's a waste of time to try to encourage close friends and relations to take up the practice of Zazen. Jack has never been moved to sit in the cross-legged position of Zazen. I tell him that as long as I practice Zazen, I am sitting for both of us. But if I should die first, then he will have to practice Zazen for both of us. A Zen student should take the same kind of care of his posture as a bonsai master takes in shaping one of his trees. Since each tree has its own unique physical form, a bonsai master will study the specimen for a long time before he begins to prune it or train it, and he will prune the tree little by little. It takes many years to bring out the natural beauty of each individual tree. We should not be in too great a hurry to force ourselves into some preconceived mold. Little by little, we should make an adjustment here or an improvement there, but we should not expect to achieve everything in the first year or two of practice. If after a reasonable trial period you find that you are not able to accept the cross-legged position, then you can at least accept the fact that you can't accept it and try to find a posture that's more appropriate for your particular physical mental build. You might try a kneeling posture with or without a cushion between the legs and buttocks. Some people prefer the Burmese posture in which the legs are folded but not crossed. And of course one can meditate in a straight chair, sitting erect and not leaning against the back. A regular program of simple yoga exercises can often be of help. Gautama Buddha built his middle way upon a firm foundation of yoga training. There are many good books on the safe and simple yoga postures which have been written for Westerners. I have discovered that 15 or 20 minutes of simple yoga exercises before Zazen is a good preparation for the mental physical posture of Zazen. Every once in a while it's worth the effort to try again a posture which you once thought was impossible. Often, changes in lifestyle, environment, or livelihood can ease tensions in the body enough to permit a posture which was once believed to be too difficult for you. And that concludes Chapter 3. And the next chapter is called Small Details. Now, I should say a word here about the structure of this book. Let's see, this book is actually divided into 3 sections. The first one is called Exploring the Zen Environment. And we've done all those chapters. Now we're into part 2. And it's called Settling Down in the Zen Environment. And we just finished chapter 2 of this, which is called, chapter 3 of this, which is called The Mudra of Zazen. And we have, about a handful of chapters left in this section. And then the last chapter, or part, it's called Part 3, Cultivating the Zen Environment. And there are 10 chapters in there. And they sound, by their titles, pretty interesting. So, yeah, hope you come back. Hope you enjoyed this. And till soon.